So digital transformation, this is a term I bet everyone is hearing in just about every company. And what I thought I would do is give you at least my perspective of what's going on from the top and the impact that it has to, I think, everyone who's involved with testing software, which is incredibly critical. But before I do that, let me give you a little bit about my background. As I have lived on both sides of the fence. So early in my career, I was with Oracle when it was a small company. Then spent the majority of my career at Merck, where I was in the IT organization for almost 24 years. And with that, I eventually ran the entire IT organization as CIO, as well as built some of Merck's digital businesses and did digital venture investing. I since retired in April, and have now moved into another role where I advise and sit on boards. So hopefully I'll be able to tie this in a little bit to some of the discussions that happen at the board level, regardless of the size of company. Also do advising for private equity with New Mountain Capital in New York, and give you a taste of what digital means also in private equity as they turn companies around. Digital is the key ingredient in almost all of those turnarounds. So what is digital transformation? Funny part is, when I talk with executives, certainly this was the case at Merck, and for those of you who don't know, Merck outside of the United States and Canada is known as Merck Sharp and Dohme, or MSD. So when I talk with many of my colleagues across the company, and Merck being a biopharmaceutical that creates therapeutics, most of those executives would say to me, it's Amazon, or it's Alibaba. That's what digital means. And that doesn't really apply to us. Because digital, we're a therapeutics company. So they would say, you know what, digital transformation, that's more for consumers and consumer companies. And the consumer companies are the ones that are reaching end users. But for most of the industrial companies, not much of an impact. My response was usually, well, what about the record companies? They used to make physical records, and now they're pretty much gone and everything's digitized. Not much of a response to that. And I think when you get to the boardroom, boards have always been talking about cyber. That used to be the conversation in the boardroom. I would say in about the last 3 or 4 years, that conversation now has shifted to what it means to become digital. I don't think many of the board members actually truly understand. Half of them probably think that if you just take what you have and move it to the cloud, you're going to become digital. But there are some board members who actually go out and take a look at all the data, and they understand that when you move companies digitally and you transform them, they create greater value. And in fact, when you look at Amazon, and you look at the digital brand that they've created, there is huge value. If you go back and look at any of the research, go back to MIT, look at Eric Bringhamson, who demonstrated that those that deploy digital technology have a meaningful difference in success and earnings and then value. So, as most boards do, they're focused on returning shareholder value. And when board members see that type of performance, they want to get on the bandwagon and drive digital in the company. So even if the CEO isn't thinking about digital, the board members are driving that discussion. McDonald's, they produce food, hamburgers. What would the digital impact be to McDonald's? The ability to drive better ordering, to interface with customers, and satisfy their needs. When you think about this, and then take it to Amazon, which I think has really taken center stage on digital, think about the brands. How many of you are an Amazon customer? Well, pretty amazing. How many of you are a Walmart customer? Not so much. Or a Walmart equivalent here in Europe. The reality is, this kind of value is going to cause every company to drive digital. In fact, as CIO, I watched CIOs ascend to the top of the ranks in companies, only now to be replaced by chief digital officers. And quite often, the CIO is reporting to a chief digital officer, or it's a business person that takes the role of chief digital officer, because the boards want to drive that same type of value. CEOs want to drive that same type of value. But we still come back to many of the industries that I'm sure are represented in this room, where you wonder, how does this affect me? How is this going to drive my company? So let me tell you a little bit about Merck, where I spent almost a quarter century. I did begin my career when I was about 10 years old, just for the record. At Merck is a company that is over 125 years old and has been producing therapeutics throughout most of its history before being a chemicals company. And when you think about that, if you went to any of the executives at Merck, they would have told you that the core of the company is a biologic or a chemical compound. There's not too much that's digital about that. You're not going to take a digital therapy. If you're suffering from cancer, someone isn't going to give you a digital solution to that. So they'd argue it's not that digital. Well, in fact, as they've gone to hire my successor, the key component of that individual's responsibilities is the continued digital transformation of the company. And why? It's not just in the way that they outreach to customers, but it's the way that the entire enterprise operates. So let me give you a little bit of my perspective as I dive into this. And what does this mean to changing an organization to become digital? Think about that, a 125-year-old company. We deployed systems to enable the capabilities that were inside the company, and then we had to transform to drive digital. It meant reconfiguring the entire organization globally. And in fact, we drove development capabilities that were of commercial grade, state-of-the-art. 3 centers, one very large one, very near to here, only 3 hours away in Prague. Another center in Asia, and one in the Americas. Bringing together IT colleagues that no longer were going to do waterfall. In the industry that I came from, waterfall was the way that you satisfied the regulators, that you built things that worked. And in fact, when you tried to do something different, the regulators would come in and give you a hard time. But all that had to change. Everything had to go to more digital, which means more speed, which means more releases. And in fact, Sandeep talked about releasing. Merck today runs on SAP in its core. SAP is released at least 4 times a year, where the entire company runs on that single instance, where over 1,000 changes are made. Nearly $1 billion in revenue per week goes through that engine. Imagine if that has a problem. It's a bad day. It's a really bad day. And a little bit of a personal story on the transformation as we stood that up. We hired incredible talent, incredible developer talent. And as I did roundtables, I went out and I met with one group, actually in Prague. And what I found was a lot of the developers were starting to leave. So when I sat down and I said, "Why are you leaving?" the number one thing that they highlighted to me was the company's test practices. And they were fed up because we were taking waterfall test practices and trying to put it into what we had converted to complete agile and complete user story and UX development teams. And folks were quitting. And it's actually at that point where the teams found Tricentis and drove the Tricentis solution to take testing to be more agile. Without that, I think more of those individuals would have quit. So think about that the testing and the methods of testing were causing the organization to lose part of its talent. That's not a good day. When you think about that engine, Merck ships therapeutics every day. In fact, we ship billions of tablets and hundreds of millions of vials and vaccines. When the technology doesn't work, nothing ships. When the technology doesn't work, manufacturing shuts down. When the technology doesn't work, research shuts down. And people die. So when you think about the criticality of software, which runs everything from the shop floor to the way that we interface with customers, including education, 4 million healthcare practitioners sign on to a portal called Univatis, for example, here in Europe, to get their education, to understand what they should do. Imagine when that doesn't work. Things stop. So in the core, in the absolute core of everything that the company does now is software. And the testing organization drove the right changes and stood up and drove more agile thinking, especially in the way that testing was done, which actually now has resulted in really reduced attrition and folks that are able to create the right products. So one of my key messages, I think, to all of you, because I know that the developers always seem to get a lot of attention. The operations folks get a lot of attention because then when something breaks, they claim to be the hero. But the glue that holds all of it together is all of you. And the ability for you to drive that agile change in the organization and not wait to be asked, but take a leadership role is absolutely essential. We saw that at Merck. And if it weren't for the testing organization driving that change, they would have been an inhibitor. We would have never been able to release the kinds of products we do. And the technology would never work the way that it needs to. It's absolutely essential. So when I think about that, you all really have an incredible leadership role. And you shouldn't think about coming into work every day as your job is just testing, but rather take that leadership to drive the right kind of agile thinking into the organization, because without that, things break. Don't wait for the operations folks to do it. Don't wait for the developers to drive that change, because I don't think that'll ever happen. It's going to be incumbent on all of you to drive that culture into the organization. I think we might have a few moments for a couple of questions. Yes? Good. Let me take a couple of questions from you. Don't be shy. It's funny, I always thought that the testing employees were the ones that were the loudest in the organization. You need to speak up. No brave souls? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, were you at Merck in Darmstadt or in North America?
North America. Merck and Company in North America, known as Merck Sharp and Dome, here internationally.
So thanks for the great presentation and for your perspective on the importance of testing. What I would like to know is, given that you are from the pharmaceutical industry here, what do you see regarding the testing budgets? Do you see a trend upwards? Is it flat? Where is it going? What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, the two areas that I think are growing are testing and cyber. Those are the two areas. And I think those two areas are also somewhat interlinked. Cyber is certainly important. I actually believe testing is more important because testing provides not only the stability and ensures that the software works properly, but also covers things like aspects of cyber. So testing is a growing area of the budget, and I don't see that stopping. It's also one of the greatest transformational areas of the budget, because testing with the new tools allows you to do even more broader capabilities. So I think that you see it not only increasing in the people, but also in the technologies that are used going forward. Excellent. Thank you all very much. Hope you have a wonderful conference.
Thank you, Clark. Thank you very much.